Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic today that I think a lot of people struggle with, and that's boundaries. Ever feel like you're constantly overwhelmed? Like you just can't say no?
You're not alone. And actually, this deep dive explores a fascinating possibility that your struggles with boundaries might actually be rooted in something much deeper than just, your current life.
Deeper, like how?
And deeper, like past lives, past life agreements, things of that nature. It's the idea that challenges we face today, especially with boundaries, could stem from outdated agreements we made in past lives, agreements that are, believe it or not, still influencing us today.
Okay, I am intrigued, but definitely need more explanation. How could something from a past life possibly affect us now?
Well, for that, we need to talk about the Akashic Records. Now, I know that might sound a little out there for some people, but stick with us because the insights we're going to explore here can be really valuable.
Okay, so for those who have never heard of them, what are the Akashic Records?
In essence, they are believed to be an energetic library, a record of every experience, choice, vow your soul has ever made across all lifetimes. Think of it like your soul's blueprint.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, like a soul-level blueprint.
Yeah.
So how do these Akashic Records tie into our present-day boundary issues?
Well, sometimes the choices we made in those past lives, those vows we took, can manifest as patterns of behavior in our present life, especially when it comes to setting those healthy boundaries we're talking about.
So we might be unconsciously playing out these old soul contracts, even if they're not serving us anymore.
That's the idea. Let's say, for example, you were a healer in a past life who made a vow to always put others' needs first, before your own.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Right. That vow, that energy could show up in your current life as difficulty saying no at work, even when you're completely overwhelmed. And it's like that past life vow is whispering in your ear, affecting your actions even now.
That's actually a really compelling example. So, okay, let's say that's true, and past lives are affecting us. How does knowing about these past life influences actually help us in the here and now?
Awareness. Knowing why you might struggle with a certain pattern gives you the context for transformation. It opens up the possibility of rewriting those old agreements.
You mean we're not just stuck with them?
Not at all. Once you're aware, you can create boundaries that are in alignment with your true self, who you are right now in this moment, not who you were in a past life. This is where the deep dive gets really interesting. It's not just about uncovering these influences, but about empowering you in the present.
I like that. Using that knowledge to change, not being a victim of it.
Exactly. So whether you fully embrace the concept of past lives or not, it's really about self-awareness, and that's valuable for everyone.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of just feeling stuck in certain patterns.
Absolutely. And in this deep dive, we're exploring the idea that some of those patterns might have roots that go way beyond this lifetime.
So essentially, we're peeling back the layers to figure out why we act and react the way we do. And in that process, we might just find that some of it's coming from, well, past life stuff.
Yep, that's the idea. And understanding is the first step towards transformation.
All right, so before we get into all that, let's take a step back and really define what we mean by healthy boundaries, because I think that term gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah, and it's often misunderstood. It's not about building walls or shutting people out.
Right. That's not what we're talking about at all.
Yeah.
So what is it?
Boundaries. It's about honoring your needs, your limits, being able to say yes to what nourishes you, and a big one, being able to say no to things that drain you.
It's like creating a safe space for yourself to just be you.
Exactly. It's about self-respect, self-love, and being able to communicate what you will and won't tolerate.
And the communication piece is so important because I think a lot of people get tripped up there. Like, how do you actually say no without feeling guilty or worrying about hurting someone's feelings?
That's a great point. It's definitely not always easy, especially if, going back to what we were talking about, you have those past life patterns of, say, always putting others first.
Like if you were that healer who is always giving, giving, giving in a past life.
Right. So this is where the real work comes in. Understanding those root causes can help you shift those old patterns and learn to communicate more effectively.
So if someone's listening and they think, okay, this all makes sense, and they recognize those past life patterns playing out, what's the first step to actually start changing them?
Awareness. Pay attention to the moments when you feel resentful, overwhelmed, or taken advantage of. Those are often signs that a boundary has been crossed.
It's about tuning into yourself, recognizing those feelings as signals that something's off.
Exactly. Those feelings are feedback. Your body's trying to tell you something. And once you start paying attention, you'll start to notice the specific situations where your boundaries need attention.
Like we're creating a roadmap of our own reactions to see where we need to set those boundaries.
That's a great way to put it. And this is where the Akashic Records come in. We can explore those records to get a deeper understanding of why those patterns might exist in the first place.
It's like we're reading the script we've been unconsciously following, and now we can choose to rewrite it.
Precisely. And that's where we're headed in the next part of this deep dive. We'll be exploring practical techniques for accessing those Akashic Records and, using that wisdom to start setting those empowering boundaries we've been talking about. But first, before we get into those techniques, let's take a look at some specific examples of those past life vows that might be playing out in your life right now, just to make it even more real.
So we've been talking about how past lives could be impacting our boundaries. But what does that actually look like? Can we get some real-life examples?
Of course, it's one thing to talk about the concept, but seeing specific examples really brings it home.
Right, like what kinds of vows or agreements are we talking about?
Well, one that comes up a lot is the vow of poverty. And this doesn't necessarily mean someone was actually poor in a past life, but more that there's this subconscious belief that they're not worthy of abundance or receiving.
So it's not the literal situation, but the underlying energy, like a belief system.
Yes, exactly. And it can show up in all sorts of ways. Maybe you struggle to ask for what you're worth at work or sabotage your own success because deep down, you don't believe you deserve it.
It's like that old vow of poverty is still lingering in the background, even if consciously you want something different.
That's a great way to put it. Another common vow is the vow of service. This is where someone might have, in a past life, dedicated themselves to serving others, often to the detriment of their own needs.
Okay, but serving others is generally seen as a good thing, so where does the boundary issue come in with that?
It becomes a problem when it turns into constant self-sacrifice, like you can't say no and you end up feeling resentful. You might be constantly putting others' needs before your own, even when it depletes you.
I see. So it's about the imbalance, not the act of service itself.
Yes. You might even think of someone who was a healer or a caregiver in a past life, always putting others first. That imprint can carry over, making it hard to set those healthy boundaries around time and energy.
It's like you're still operating from that old contract, even if you don't realize it.
Exactly. And remember, those vows weren't made with bad intentions. Often they were about helping others or expressing deep compassion. But if they're causing imbalance now, it might be time to reevaluate.
So the big question is, how do we actually break free from these vows? It's like, how can you change something that happened in a past life?
The key is, you're not erasing the past, but choosing to release what no longer serves you. And you always have the power to choose. Free will is always there.
Okay, so we're not powerless. We can rewrite the contract.
Yes, and the first step, believe it or not, is just acknowledging it. Saying it out loud, writing it down, bringing it into your conscious awareness. That could be so powerful.
It's like shining a light on those hidden parts of ourselves.
Right. And then express gratitude for what that vow taught you. Maybe it taught you compassion or empathy. Acknowledge the positive, but also recognize that it's time to let the vow itself go.
So it's about honoring the past, but recognizing we've evolved. What we needed then might not be what we need now.
Precisely. And then declare your intention to release it. You can visualize it. Imagine cutting the energetic cords that bind you to it.
Ooh, that's powerful, cutting those cords.
Yes. And, you can always ask your guides, your higher self, or even the Akashic Records themselves to help you with this.
It's amazing to think we have that support, both within us and outside of us.
We do. And here's another thing to consider. Sometimes these vows can actually be connected to specific people in our lives.
Well, that makes sense. Like maybe you keep attracting partners who take advantage of your giving nature because of that old vow of service.
Exactly. And in those cases, it's important to remember that the other person might be unconsciously playing a role, triggering that old vow.
Like they're reflecting something back to us that we need to heal.
Exactly. And this is where setting those boundaries is so crucial. Communicating what you need, lovingly but clearly.
So it's about taking responsibility for your own energy and creating that safe space we talked about.
Yes. Sometimes releasing a vow might even mean creating distance or stepping away from a relationship completely.
Which I imagine can be a really tough decision.
It can be. But it's important to remember, boundaries are an act of self-love, not just for you, but for the other person as well. It allows them to step into their power, too.
Wow. It's like breaking a cycle, creating space for everyone to grow.
That's a great way to see it. And, it's not always easy, but it's the most loving and empowering thing to do.
This has been so insightful. If there was one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember, what would it be?
You have the power to rewrite your story. The past does not define you. By exploring these concepts, releasing what no longer serves you, you can create a life aligned with who you are, your soul's purpose, all of it.
I love that.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, how do we actually access these Akashic records? Can anyone do it?
That's a great question. And it's the perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring some techniques to access your own Akashic records and then using that wisdom to set those empowering boundaries we've been talking about.
All right, so we've talked about past lives, we've talked about vows, and we've talked about how these things could be affecting our boundaries. The question now is, how do we actually access those Akashic records? Is it something anyone can do?
You absolutely can. It's like any skill. It just takes practice and, trust in yourself.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
The first thing is to create a sacred space for yourself.
Does that mean like crystals and incense?
It can, but it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It could just be a quiet corner of your home where you won't be disturbed. Just somewhere you feel comfortable. Light a candle, dim the lights, maybe put on some calming music. Anything that helps you feel grounded.
It's about setting the mood for an inward journey.
Exactly. And once you've created that space, take some time to connect with your breath, feel your feet on the ground, just let go of any tension you're holding in your body. It helps shift you out of your busy mind and into a more receptive state.
It's like creating a bridge between everyday life and, well, those Akashic records.
I like that. And once you feel centered and grounded, state your intention. You can say it out loud or silently. Something like, I request access to my Akashic records for the highest good of all.
Okay, so it's like we're knocking on the door of this universal library and asking politely to be let in.
Exactly. And then use your imagination. Visualize yourself walking into this beautiful library, shelves and shelves of books, each one containing a chapter of your soul's journey.
Oh, I like that imagery. Walking through this library of your soul.
And as you're walking, allow yourself to feel curious. Ask your guides, your higher self, the Akashic records themselves, to show you what would be most helpful.
So we're not forcing anything, just opening ourselves up to receiving whatever comes through.
Exactly. And be open. Information can come in so many forms, images, symbols, words, or even just a feeling or knowing. Don't dismiss anything, even if it seems strange at first.
Trust your gut.
Yes. Trust your intuition. There's no right or wrong way to do this. What matters is an open heart and a willingness to receive the wisdom.
So going back to those past life vows, how can someone use the Akashic records to get more clarity on those?
Once you feel connected to that Akashic energy, you can start asking specific questions about your boundaries, like, what past life vows are affecting my ability to say no? Or what do I need to know to set healthier boundaries in my relationships?
It's like having this direct line to your own soul's wisdom, getting that personalized advice.
Exactly. And the answers might surprise you, but they will always be for your highest good.
It's a reminder to trust the process, even when it gets uncomfortable or challenges what we think we know.
That's it. That's the beauty of this work. It's a journey. And by exploring and connecting with your Akashic records, you're gaining insight into your past, Andy, empowering yourself to create a better future.
You're realizing you're not bound by the past. You can make a different choice.
Absolutely. The more you connect with that inner wisdom, the more you realize you have everything you need right inside you. You have the power.
Such a powerful message. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the most important thing you want listeners to remember?
Remember that you are not your past. You're a powerful being with the ability to choose, to change, to evolve. The Akashic records, they're simply a tool, a way to connect with that power within you.
What a beautiful way to end this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your insights. And to everyone listening, we encourage you to explore these ideas. See what happens, what unfolds for you. Remember, you have the power to change. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep shining your light.